Okay, we have completed step one of the manual, which is to assemble the struts and the skid tubes together and get them mounted to the frame. I wanted to point out a couple of things before I skip to the to step three, which is to assemble the tail box to the boom. One is I just wanted to point out that the struts are quite clever in that they form part of the structural integrity of the base of the helicopter. You can also drop the engine without dropping the skids, which makes it really, really nice. There's a separate base plate that goes underneath the engine, and as long as you remove that, you can get the engine out without removing the skids. It makes it very nice. The other thing that they've changed, Compass have changed on the 3D Plus versus the old Knight 3D, is that they've gone to the canopy mounting system that is similar to the Odin and the Atom. And what that means is that you've got this spur that sticks out on the front of the struts. There's a little on the canopy, on the front of the canopy. There's a little plastic mounting tab. Slides over that, and then you've got two thumb screws that affix through the canopy out the back. So instead of having the four thumb screw setup of the Knight 3D, on the Compass 3D Plus, you've now got the same setup as the Odin and the Atom. The struts are interchangeable. They do not have to be front or back. They've both got the tab, so if you break one and you want to just use one half of another set, you can move that to the front or however you want to do it. They're completely interchangeable. The other thing that I will point out is that there are some screws on these frames, including the screws that go in through the struts that affix them to the frame, that are Phillips head screws. And they are Japanese Imperial Standard, or JIS screws, so make sure that you've got a good JIS screwdriver anytime you are driving one of these Phillips head screws in, otherwise you will round them out. I'm not a big fan of Phillips screws on a helicopter. I prefer all hex head screws, but there are the odd Phillips screw on this frame. I've got a chrome vanadium Japanese Imperial Standard screwdriver that zips it straight in, fits it absolutely perfectly, no rounding out of the head. So make sure you use the appropriate size screwdriver so you do not round out any heads, otherwise you have a hard time getting those screws back out of the frame. The other tip that I will point out is that the skid tubes have these little plastic caps that go into the end of them. Put a little tiny drop of CA glue onto the cap before you stick it into the skid tube to prevent them from coming loose in flight and losing the caps. It's not a big deal, just a bit of aesthetics right there. Also, when you open up the main parts bag, I'll show you some of the sub bags that you have inside. You've got the engine clutch, you've got the engine fan, the fan hub, as well as that little base plate that goes underneath the engine. It says step 2 on the bag. We've got the flybar paddles, we've got the swash plate, the washout, and the washout mixers, and the phasing ring. That's step 5, and that's in the main bag as well. Step 6 is in the main bag as well. That is the servo nuts that go on the back of the servos and some of the other servo hardware, like your balls for your links on the servos. Also, they come with very nice blue anodized thumb screws. Also in that same main hardware bag, it says step 12 on it, and also the canopy mount as well that goes over the strut. The entire tail box assembly, the open tail box assembly, which comes pre-assembled and ready to install to the boom, comes in this bag here, which is also inside the main hardware bag. Comes with the belt-driven tail, comes with the yellow tail blades as well, which I'm swapping out for the K&B Dream Design tail blades. All Compass helicopters come with a belt-driven tail. Now, some people like that, some people don't. Some people prefer a torque tube-driven tail, some people prefer a belt. Some of the pros and cons you probably well know, but basically a belt-driven tail, particularly in a crash, tends to be a lot more durable than a torque tube. Also, in any hard auto-rotational landings, with a torque tube you can oftentimes strip the torque tube drive gears, either the front ones or the rear ones, in a rough landing where the tail touches the ground. You won't get that with a belt. So there are some pros with a belt-driven tail. Some people say that a torque tube-driven tail is more efficient than a belt. Okay, sure, but will the average pilot notice it in flight? Probably not. I probably won't. I've flown both types of helicopters. I like both types of tail drive systems. Compass have chosen to go with a belt for low cost, because a belt is a lower cost replacement item, should you ever need to, than a torque tube, because anytime you have a crash with a torque tube driven tail, you're going to destroy both the boom and the torque tube requiring replacement of both of those parts, plus probably the drive gears front and rear. With a belt, you're not going to get that. You're just going to replace the boom most likely. Very rarely do you destroy the belt. So that's what we've got here in this bag. Enough on belts versus torque tubes. I'll leave that up to you to decide what you prefer, but that's what Compass has chosen to go with, and I have no problem with that. I think it's an absolutely fine design. The other thing that you will notice if you've never built a Compass helicopter before is that You've got dual control on the pitchfork, and yeah, so that makes it very, very strong, makes it very sturdy, makes a very positive feel to the tail. We'll be back in a second. Okay, we have just completed steps 1 and 3 in the manual, skipping step 2 because I don't have the engine. So I don't have the engine yet. It will be here shortly. In any case, so we've already assembled the landing gear. We've already discussed that. I've just assembled the tail case, the vertical fin, the horizontal fin, and the boom supports. There's a couple of little gotchas, nothing major and nothing that isn't covered in the manual, but just a couple of things to watch out for. One is that the brackets that hold the vertical fin and the horizontal fin are very, very similar. They look virtually identical. However, I will show you a component that is slightly different between the two. The bottom half of the horizontal fin mount has angles at the bottom of it that are angled downwards towards the fuselage of the helicopter to put the boom supports at the correct angle. So the bracket here and the bracket here look virtually identical, but the short side of the bracket, this bracket for the vertical fin, the back side is flat. On the back side of the horizontal fin, it's angled. So make sure that you choose and select the right halves to go together for each part. And also, I'll just explain how the tail box affixes to the boom. There's a couple of interesting features the way it works. Basically, on this side, this screw here simply goes all the way in and seats flush. Now, what that forms is a guide that the slotted tail boom slides onto and seats fully into the housing. On this side, so on the vertical fin side, this screw here goes through the vertical fin and into the tail case and just compresses the boom slightly on the tail case. It doesn't go all the way into the tail boom. So that is what sets the distance between the tail case and your vertical fin mount. So that screw there sets there. Those two screws go through the vertical fin mount with lock nuts on the back, nylock nuts on the back, and that's how that compresses together. So the boom is compressed both by the fin as well as the tail case, so no chance of it coming off, and we've got the tail belt there as well. Obviously, I haven't tightened this horizontal fin mount down yet until I get it assembled to the fuselage, so I know how far forward it needs to be for those supports to hit the frame. So anyways, we'll continue working away on this, but I just wanted to show you those couple of gotchas. You will want to use Loctite. I always clean any screw that's going into metal should be Loctited, and any screw that's going into a nylock doesn't need anything on it. What I always do is I always clean my screws that are going to be Loctited with methylated spirits. You can use denatured alcohol, you can use acetone, you can use whatever you like, but the finishing oil that they use on these screws, some of it sticks to the screw and doesn't allow the Loctite to work as well as it can. So always clean your screws with a little bit of methylated spirits or alcohol before you hit them with a little bit of Loctite. I've gone to using this Loctite 248 glue stick as opposed to the liquid Loctite, which I've always used historically. Has a longer shelf life, works a lot better, and you don't get it all over the inside of the cap like you do with the liquid Loctite. So use whatever you like, but make sure screws going into metal get cleaned and Loctited before you affix them. So we're moving on now. So we've just completed step 3 in the manual, which is to affix that tail boom case to the boom. So the next step is step 4, or the remainder of step 3 is at the top of the page, and then step 4 down at the bottom. So what we're going to do is we're going to stick the boom into the back of the frame. We're going to get it all tightened up. We're going to finish up tightening down those boom supports and getting that horizontal fin tightened down as well. And then the next step, which is step 4, is to install the main gear and the main shaft, and then installing the head components in step 5. So I'll go ahead and do those next couple of bits. I'll come back to you and we can cover any of the gotchas or ideas that I need to cover.